In 1975, I left Corpus Christi and began my college education at East Texas Baptist College. Took with me Doug Reagan, who served as my roommate until I got married, and then I passed him off to my younger brother to finish out his time there. Among the many people that I met at East Texas Baptist at that time was Salt Jones. And he was a part of a collection of students that I want to say our time together was very unique and special to us. We grew very close, and we've remained close through all of these years. It was a year ago, which was the last time I spoke with Salt, and it was upon the death of my college roommate, Doug Reagan. Many of us gathered back in Marshall, went to his memorial service, and we spent time in fellowship. And when we were at the Husings' house, then they called Salt, and so we all got to talk to him, and I got to speak to him. That was the last time I heard his voice. When I read the news on Facebook, the East Texas Baptist University Facebook page, and saw the announcement that Salt had finally died after a long bout with cancer, I remembered that when we were in Maryland, that Salt came through on a visit. He preached for me and shared his testimony. And I thought this would be a good time and a good tribute for those of you who are graduates of East Texas Baptist or attended there or were there during Salt's days, that many of you perhaps never heard his story. And so I wanted to post it here as my tribute to him, and I want to thank you for the privilege of being able to do so. This was shot during the wintertime. There's a little caption there at the beginning to tell you the conditions under which it was. And because of those conditions, the lighting wasn't great. I've gone back and tried to edit the sound to improve that because we had torpedo heaters going in the background and the lighting was terrible. So I've done the best I could, but you'll be able to hear and listen to Salt in his own words. And hopefully you'll be blessed and encouraged by it. Thank you for the privilege.
Get seated, we'll keep moving.
It's on. 1, 2, 3. All right, there we go. Thank you, Todd. First of all, I want to say a special thank you for your church. I've been here this weekend. I've seen what you've done over here and the hundreds, yea, thousands of hours that you have done. That is a testimony upon who you are and to this community. And as this community begins to come more and more and see what you have done, that is absolutely amazing. One thing about the body of Christ, we are not all teachers, we're not all preachers, and we shouldn't be. We need everyone, and the talents and gifts that God has given each one of us. We need, just like I need this little finger, just like I need this index finger, this arm, we need each other. And what you have done is a real testimony of that. Also, like in my job, I live in Canada, and I work all across Canada, and I've been to hundreds of churches. I want to say special thank you, and the worship team never does this to get thank you. Just like anyone else, they just do it to the Lord. But I've been around many, many worship teams. You guys don't know, you got one of the best. Most of us during the week, we should come in here ready to worship the Lord. But most of us, when we come in, we're thinking about payments, car problems, leaving the house, all this, and we really don't come in many times ready to worship. And the worship team brings us to that point, right to the throne of God. And my friends, if you weren't brought to the throne of God today, it's something in your heart. It's not what's happening every day. And I want to say I worshiped God this morning. And I was over there. It was just tremendous. So they never do that for thank yous, but on behalf of my heart, thank you to you guys who did that. Well, John said that my name is Salt, S-A-L-T. It's a nickname. I grew up in West Texas in an area where we had large ranches. In fact, my dad's ranch was about 10 sections, and 640 acres in a section, so you got an idea of the size of that ranch. I grew up in an area that's not very populated. My entire high school had 51 students. That's grade 9, 10, 11, 12. My graduating class had 20, 16 of us started grade 1 together. You talk about close community. Out of our graduating class of 20, we had 16 boys and 4 girls. Oh, man. A lot of celibate men during that time. So as Jeff Foxworthy says, I was redneck when redneck wasn't cool. I grew up in that lifestyle. Farming, ranching, hard-working people. As some of you, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I had friends who grew up in a Christian home, but I didn't. My dad, he had had some experiences earlier in life, and he had pretty much said God would not be part of our lives in my home. I'm the oldest, and so my dad is nicknamed Salty. In fact, he's not now because he's 73, but when he was my age, he was 6'5" and weighed about 275. And they called him Big Salty. Now, I was born, I'm the oldest, they called me Little Salt. So ever since then, I've been called Little Salt. When I got to college, I dropped the little. I didn't like that. So it's Salt. I have a brother, he's 5 years younger than I. His nickname's Pepper. And I have a sister, she's 12 years younger than I, and her name's Candy. So, in our house, it's salt, pepper, candy. That's no problem until you get around the breakfast table and you say salt, pass the pepper, pepper, pass salt, candy, pass the salt, pepper. It gets a little confusing sometimes. But when we graduated my senior year and we walked across, then all 20 of us, every one of us was, even though maybe on our certificate was our given name, every one of us was called by our nicknames. And it was an area that the nicknames were not derogatory, they were special. And everybody called you that. So I've been called Salt from day one. And in that. So in growing up, again, I did grow up in a Christian family. Now my mother had a Christian background. And she actually wanted to take me to church when I was young. And she did on occasion till I got to about the 3rd grade. When I was in about the 3rd grade, one day my dad came to me and said, son, you have a choice to make. You can either go to church on Sundays with your mom, and we will work Sunday afternoon. Or you can go to work with me on Sunday morning, and Sunday afternoon we're going to watch football. Now, for a guy from Texas, that's like saying to a kid in grade 3, you can either have McDonald's hamburger, or you can have liver and onions. There was no question in that. No choice. From that point on, I worked with my dad on Sunday mornings. We'd go and feed the cattle, plow, whatever it was, hold the cotton, whatever needed to be done on the Sunday mornings. And Sunday afternoon, we watched football when football was going on, basketball going on, the whole thing. I never got into hockey that much till I got to Canada, but I'd watch hockey now, but didn't watch it then. Well, most farmers and ranchers, like maybe, your occupation, they're self-made men. And my dad worked hard, self-made man, and pretty much his feeling was, if there is a God, he's given me the abilities to do this, everything I've got, I've worked for. If there is a God, he must think I must be somewhat okay, because everything I've got, I've worked for, I've done it. And so, as I said, religion didn't play a big part in our lives. Now, my dad, when he graduated from university, you have to understand, this was in 1949 or so, 6'5" was a big man. Now, that wouldn't even make a good point guard in university, but he started 5 sports, varsity sports, his last year in university. Well, naturally, you want to be kind of like your father when you're a kid, so I wanted to be an athlete. Well, when I graduated from high school, I was this tall, but I weighed 140 pounds. Well, not many 140 pounds going to knock many people around on football field and stuff, but I played basketball. I found my little niche in basketball. And, but during one of our final games, in fact, it was a bi-district game, at least in Texas, what we call it, I had a guy fall on, with playing ball, a guy fell on my knee, he injured it, had to go to the doctor, they ended up putting it in a cast, and so for the next 3 months I was in this cast. Now they don't do it this way, but it was the plastic Paris one from your kind of your hip down to your foot. Well, if you know anything about riding horses and driving a tractor, you can't do it with a foot like that. So all of a sudden I had a lot of free time. And it just so happened there was a girl in grade, the freshman, because none of the seniors would go out with me, and the freshman that I wanted to go out with. And it just so happened her dad went to the Baptist church. Now, if she'd gone to the Methodist church or the Presbyterian, and he said, no one dates my daughter unless they come to church. Well, hey, I started going to church. Not so much to know about God, I want to go out with that girl. And so I started going to church, and I couldn't go to work. There wasn't an excuse about that. And so you can only sit around the house so much. And so I started going to church and began hearing this, that God loves you. Well, when initially that was said, I didn't buy into that. God's a God of love. Why did he do this for my leg? It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. But because I wanted to go out with this girl, I kept going. And God just slowly began to soften my heart and to help me see that there was more to life than what I was experiencing. And as that began to happen, God really talked to me, and I came to the point that I wanted to make a profession of faith. So one Sunday night, at a service somewhat like this, as a youth service, I made a profession of faith. Now, I wasn't a wicked, evil, mean, and nasty boy growing up. I was mischievous. Oh, man. I still am. I'll give you an example. One time, one of the times I did go to church was when I was like a sophomore in high school, and they were having a revival. And some of my friends who went to church had this thing about pack a pew. And meaning that if you could pack your pew, you might got to get the bicycle or something. The one that brought the most kids could come. So I went because they said, man, come, we'll be able to do this. I'll be able to win. I said, well, okay. So I was in the back row, and it wasn't chairs like these. There were pews. I was in the row with about 3 or 4 of my friends, and I don't remember it real well, but I know we were cutting up. I know we weren't being reverent in any way. And as I'm sitting here, the preacher was preaching, and he just stopped. And he said, you 3 boys back there, you come right down here to the front. I said, right here. I've had enough. Well, the other 2 guys, their dads went to church with there. They politely got on the side and walked down. As I'm sitting here, I walked across every pew all the way down to the front. I wasn't no wicked, evil, meaning, nasty guy. I never slashed tires or anything like that. But I was pretty stubborn. And I was pretty mischievous, and that when I got home, I got pretty beat. Oh, that was right. Dad found out about that. He didn't care that I went to church. He just didn't want to embarrass his name, and I'd done that. That wasn't a good thing. So, although I wasn't a bad guy, in the sense what the world would say bad, when God came in my life, it was a 180-degree turn, where I had a new sense of purpose, a new sense of direction. I had a sense of forgiveness of sins, and I was radically changed. Well, my dad, we sat down about this. My dad said, it's okay. It's okay to be a Christian, but now just don't get too serious in this stuff. Let's keep it perspective. Well, within about 6 months, he could see that my heart was changing. Prior to that time, as I was going to go and I started the university, he wanted me to go in veterinary science. I was very interested in cattle, come back to the ranch, take over the ranch, work with cattle and horses. And that sounded good to me. And that's really what he wanted me to do. So we were going that direction, but I caught myself out on the tractor or on the horse, preaching to the cows. I see that tail, come on down. Yes, sir. And before long, I found myself, really wanting to work with people. Now, there's nothing wrong with animals. A veterinary degree and work, that's a great profession. But I wanted to say, if I'm going to give my life to something, I want to work with people. I want them to know the Jesus that I know. I want them to experience the change that happened in my life. Well, as that started happening in my life, my dad saw that happen too. And again, we have to understand, and if you're not a non-believer today, it's just the way it is. Some things a non-believer cannot understand about Christian things. I mean, I remember before I became a Christian, some of my friends went to church, and I would say, well, I can see why you'd go to Sunday morning, but why Sunday night? Or why would you give your money? No, put it in investments. That's where you put your money. I mean, as a non-believer, there are things I could not understand. And again, before long, I just felt God. I sensed Him calling me into ministry. So I went to Him one day, to my dad, and I told him, this is what I feel God wanted me to do. I would like to go into ministry. Well, this was in 1971. If you know anything, you guys this age know that was a pretty rebellious time in the world, the end of Vietnam, all the things were going on. And even though I meant well, I still was dealing some of that rebellion. I was still a young Christian trying to transform from the old ways to the new. And I'm sure that there was some of the ways I said it and stuff was not probably the best. But as we were talking, my dad said, that's not an option. That will not happen. You're not going to do that. Well, that old self and just saying, you can't tell me what to do. I'm 20 years old, this kind of thing, I was dealing with that. And then he said, if you choose that route, you will not be welcome in this house. You will get no inheritance, and it's over. Well, for a 19, 20-year-old who's their whole life has been on the ranch, your whole history, your heritage, your family, that was a heavy thing. And so for about the next 2 months, I'd go to church, but I didn't even talk about it. I'd just be on the tractor, or I'd be on the horse, or I'd be out hoeing, or whatever we would be doing, and just saying, God, if I make this step, if I'm obedient to you, I'm going to lose my past. I'm going to lose all that. And I just struggled within. Will I be obedient what God's asked me to do, or what? Well, I came to the point that He wouldn't let me go. I had no peace without being obedient. And so one night I came to my dad and I said, I'm going to make this decision. And as I'm standing here, the word he said, get the hell out of my house and the hell off my land and don't you ever come back. So I packed up my stuff, put it in my pickup truck. I drove a pickup truck when it wasn't cool then. Now it's cool. Now they don't look like they do today. I will tell you, mine looked like a pickup truck. Today they look pretty nice. But put it in my pickup truck, tears in my eyes, and I drove on. My mama was there. My brother, he was in freshman in high school. He didn't understand what was happening. My sister was 6 years old when this happened. She couldn't understand. Crying in the bed. It wasn't a good scene. Again, part of it was my own trying to work through my own sinfulness, that having God renew me and stuff. Part of it was my dad. That's the decision was made. At that time is when I was deciding I needed to go change from the university. What I was going through didn't have any kind of Bible courses. And when I became a Christian, I couldn't have told you that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were even in the Bible, much less what they were. I mean, I had no idea. So I decided if I'm going to be, quote, a preacher boy, I need to find out a little bit about the Bible. So I decided I'd go to a school that offered a religion major. And that's where I met James, Sarah Jane, and John, and Jeanette was at East Texas Baptist College. So when I got there, you talk about green in the face. The professor would say turn to something, and I was sitting there going to the table of contents. Everybody else was starting reading when I was trying to find it. You may know what that's like. And so I knew that I had to make up time Well, that first summer, I went on summer missions to Mexico. And because I'm from Texas, lots of Mexican Americans there. That's part of our culture. Went there, and for all things, I raised rabbits in Mexico. That's why I went down there to raise rabbits in this mission project. But there was an older man there that took me by his side, and he said to me one time as we were talking about, my life story. He said, "Saul, let me ask you this: what kind of God did you leave at home?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "When your dad thinks about God now, or your mother or your brother, what do they think about?" Well, my dad was so mad he could bit nails into, and my mother, she was crushed in situations, and my brother and sister, they didn't fit. And he says, "I want to challenge you that one day the door may open for you to go back home. And at that time, it was still a little that rebellion of the old nature stuff. I'm never going back there. I'm going to prove that, I can make it. And in the conversation of all that my dad and I said, anger saying, one of the things he said, "You'll never make it on. You'll come back here to the farm. You can't do it." And that even made me more determined. I'm going to show you, sucker. And just the challenge in that time in my life. And so this older man really helped me understand, one day the door may open for you to go back, be open, which I said, sure, but I knew that would never happen. You know how that never. So I went back to school the next year, hadn't been home for a year and a half. About 4 days before Christmas, my dad called me. First time we would talk, I'd call home. If he picked up the phone, just hung it up. If my mom picked up the phone, we would talk, or brother and sister. First time I talked to my dad, he said, "Saul?" I said, "Yes, sir." And my home goes, say, "Yes, sir," "No, sir," "Yes, ma'am," "No, ma'am." That's part of the Texas thing. I said, "Yes, my dad's 73. I'm 49. "Yes, sir." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, your mom and your brother and your sister miss you. I guess it's okay. You come home for 2 days." 2 days. I said, "Okay." Now, I had everything planned out. I was going to share how Jesus could come into his life. I had it all marked out that, I'm going to tell him about what God's done. I drove up to our ranch area. My dad came out, met me outside, and he asked me these 2 questions before I had a word to say. He said, "If your God is a God of love, why did my mother have to die the way she did? My grandmother suffered tremendously through cancer. It was terrible. And then he said, if your God's a God of love, why are the children in Bangladesh starving to death?" And that time, that it was Bangladesh. Now it's Africa or somewhere else. Well, here I was, only been a Christian for about a year and a half. Hadn't grown. I'm growing, but all I could say was, "I don't know." Now, there are some questions, it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or a non-Christian, we are not going to get good answers to until we see Jesus face to face. But the good thing of that 2 days, we didn't get any arguments. But when I left and I went back to school, I started asking all my professors, Christian professors, my Christian friends, if someone was to ever ask you this question, how in the world would you answer them? Because I didn't know if I'd ever have a time in the future, but I knew I wanted to say more than "I don't know." So that semester went through. I was planning to go back to Mexico that next summer. And again, about 10 days before school was out, my dad called. He said, "Saul?" "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, I know that you're not getting money from us." Every now and then my mom would send me some secret $50 bills. He didn't know about that. And I know, school costs things and stuff. I've decided I'll let you come home this summer. I'll pay you basic wage, and I'll only charge you half room and board. I charge you full room and board, but your mother says this house is half hers. So you can come home underneath those conditions. Well, I said, okay. I thought this may be the last chance I might have for a concerted amount of time, like 3 months at home. So I said, "Papa, come home." Well, I hung up the phone, and I've been going through some seminars and things of some people teaching that if you come from a non-Christian family, and you've made some decisions that the non-Christian father or mother cannot understand, and if maybe they're seeing it as a matter of defiance or not being obedient to them, that maybe God would like for you to go back to that parent, as a young person, as I was a young person, and give that choice to them. Well, as I'd heard that, I said, there ain't no way I'm going to give the choice what I'm going to do to my dad. He'll have me out there hoeing cotton, and I'm not going to go back to that. But God just kept working my heart in those 2 weeks saying, your dad sees you as a rebellious kid. Even though you're 21 years old, he sees you as a rebellious kid that doesn't care anything about the family, doesn't care anything about the roots, doesn't care anything about the land and stuff that he's worked so hard to acquire. Let me change your dad. So I got there and the next morning we were going to work, and I told my dad, was in the pickup truck, and I said, Papa, if you don't want me going back to that school, and if you want me to go to this other school, I will. And he said, I knew you'd see those blankety-blank Baptists there, blankety-blank, blank, blank, blank. And which I used to use all those words before I became a believer. And I said, no, sir, that's not it. And I said, if you don't want me to go into ministry, but you want me to go back into sciences and go into veterinary science, if that's what you want me to do, I'll do it. He says, I knew you'd see that blankety blank, 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 blank. I said, no, sir. And he said, well, why are you saying this, son? And with all the strength I could say, I said, Papa, I'm trusting that the God who changed my life, that if he wants me to go into ministry, he's going to change your heart and you'll want me to go. He didn't say a word. I got out of that pickup truck, got on the tractor, and I promise you I cried all day. I said, it's over! I'm going to be here the rest of my life. I don't care about those cows. No, I'm never saved or not. I'm going to tell them to. Oh, I just wept. I said, there ain't no way. My dad's not going to let me go back to ministry. It's over. Well, basically, most of the summer, never anything said. I went ahead and applied to the university I was previously, to be accepted and everything. And then the second miracle of my life happened. The first is when he can take whether you're a 7-year-old child or a 47-year-old man, and he can turn a heart around. He did that for me when I was 19. But we were at home one night, and here I was, 21 years of age, and no friend of mine had ever spent the night at our house. But my dad had a rule, says, we get up at 5 o'clock, we go to work, I'm not taking someone's kid back to their house. He said, we're not having any of this spend the night stuff. I was 21 years old, and the phone rang. And the university I went to was 500 miles from my home, and 500 miles on this side was a place where a group of young students were coming through to go. My BSM director, and actually Sarah Jane was part of that group. About seven university kids, and my BSM director was going. And he called me. He said, so it's 500 miles. Can we just spend the night at in your church? And some reason, I put down the phone. My dad was over there with the paper, with the television going on, the radio going on. You didn't touch the television, you didn't touch the radio, you didn't touch the paper till he was through doing his thing. My mom was there, and I said, Mom, and I told them that they're coming through, could they stay at our house? Because we had a big house. As I'm standing here, my dad put down the paper, he looked over at me, and he said, yeah, let your friends stay here. I want to see what they're made up of. I started to go, nope, you can't stay here. But for some reason, I said, you can stay here. I hung up, and I thought, oh, God, what did I do? And so my dad's a big man, played 5 sports. In our house are these deer mounts and sheep mounts. He's hunted everywhere, with all these, with his hunting and everything. My BSM director, great guy, but I think he played sports, was like playing chess. And his idea of hunting was taking pictures. And I thought, oh man, my dad's going to chew him up, spit him out. It's over. But it was the second miracle of my life. Two people went just like that with my sister. A couple went like that with my brother. Some went like my mother. And John Nance, this BSM director, knew exactly what to say and what not to say. When they came in that night, one of them said, "What if we sing some songs?" And they brought in some guitars, and other than Happy Birthday, it was the first songs ever sung in my house. And they brought in their guitars, sang some Christian songs and stuff. Now, my dad and mom, they didn't know them, but they sang. And then we got around for the supper table. And my dad said, "Mr. Nance, would you like to say grace?" I couldn't believe it. And Mr. Nance, John Nance, said the blessing. We ate, had a good time. The next morning, they went off to their conference. I went back to work, crying all day. I want to go back there. I want to be here. Well, that night around our supper table with his family, if my dad ever clears his throat, everybody stops, even mom. If you're chewing, you just swallow it. Because he's got something to say. You don't talk, you don't eat. He cleared his throat and he said, "Salt?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Those people, they really like you, don't they?" I said, "Yes, sir." And this is the first time he ever said this word that I remember. He said, "They love you, don't they?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "That's where I want you to go to school." And he said, "You know, it doesn't make any sense to me why you'd want to be in ministry. There's no money, there's no land, you travel, you're far away from home and family. But if that's what you want to do, you got my blessing." You know what God taught me out of that was that when I came back and said to my dad, "I will give you the choice," I had to give God my future. I already had to give him my past. And say, my dad said, "If you choose that, there's no history for you, no family, no inheritance." I had to give him my future, God my future. And he turned around, and he not only gave me my future, he gave me back my past. Now, my dad's 73. When he was 70, he became a believer. Oh. My dad's been married 4 times. In that process, one of the things with me leaving and everything, my dad and mom were having trouble. In fact, when I was in junior high, my dad sat me down and said, "Now, you know your mom and I were struggling." He said, "We're going to stay together till the kids, till you guys get out of school. But, we're struggling." And sure enough, it was a terrible time, but the night my sister graduated high school, my dad moved out. And for the longest, my sister thought if I did something different, it wasn't Katie's fault. I mean, from all those years they were struggling. But my dad's been married 4 times, and in the process of him and my mom separating, many of you have been through this either personally or with family. Even the best circumstances, it's tough. But in the process of my mom and dad, things were said. It's interesting. Sometimes the people you love the most, you say the cruelest things to. I remember as a kid, my mom would be shopping and she wouldn't let me have this candy, and I said, "You don't love me? You hate me?" Well, who loved me more in this life than my mom? Sometimes the people we're closest to would say the most hurtful things. Well, that took place in our divorce. Toward the children, it was just a rough time. Out of that, my brother, when that ended, my brother has never called my father Papa or Father or anything since then. He calls him Salty. And when we're back and someone comes in, he doesn't even introduce him. "This is my dad." He said, "This is Salty Jones." In fact, he says, I have a personal vendetta against my dad. My brother's still not a believer. But I have found that one of the greatest gifts of being a believer, he allows you to be able to forgive. And for the longest, I struggled, even as a believer, when I see my dad and this issue would come up, all of a sudden, all this past stuff would come up. And I just, have you ever felt like you walk up to someone and your jaws start tightening up? But God slowly but surely gave me, through his strength, the ability to truly forgive my dad. I love him. Now, there's some things we don't agree on. And there's some choices that have been made that I don't respect. But I truly love my dad. I love him. I have another story to tell you. When I was in about grade 6, we lived out on a ranch. And I mean, my dad right now, he says, I can drive 10 miles and see 2 cars. That's the way I like it. I mean, where we live with my wife, when we go out there, she says it's so quiet, it's spooky. Because all you hear is the cows or a coyote. I mean, there's nothing. Well, because of that, we burned our trash out there, you know, and in West Texas, it's a lot like today. The wind, it blows all the time. So when you're burning trash, you know, you separate the cans and the bottles and the burn stuff, and you have to let it burn down in that big old 55-gallon drum, or it could blow out and catch the grass on fire. So one of my jobs as a grade 6 kid was to go out and burn the trash. Well, now, you're never supposed to put an aerosol can down in those. But you know, sometimes you get a little bored. And so every now and then I do that, you know. And, well, that was before, at least before we had a dryer, and my mother would hang clothes out on the clothesline. And one day I was out there, and you know, I was getting a little bored, so I set out some cans out there, and I was throwing rocks, trying to hit those cans. Well, I ran out of rocks, and all the times we put the glass and stuff in there, I saw some glass down there. So I picked up a couple pieces of glass and was throwing it over there. Well, my mother, she wasn't too far away, but she must have saw the light glistening off the glass, because she said, "Salt?" "Yes, ma'am." "Are you throwing glass?" "No, ma'am." "Okay, just be careful. Don't throw glass. It could cut you." "Okay." Well, she finished and went on in, and I was sitting there, and I saw this perfect piece of glass. She wasn't around. So I picked it up, and I threw it. But I didn't realize it had a lip on it. And as a 6th grader, you'd see my finger, if you're close enough, you can have a scar from here and cut it all the way to the bone. Now, I didn't have a very thick finger, so I didn't have to cut very far. But I grabbed it, went in, ah! Mother looked at it, ah! The doctor went, ah! No, the doctor didn't do that. The doctor sewed it up, and he said, "Well, son, you know, it looks like it's going to be okay. I can't pull it in any further than that unless I pull it in like that. But other than that, I don't have any problem with it." Well, after I became a Christian, and of course I've always had this scar, you know, I thought, you know, I probably never asked Mama to forgive me for being disobedient. So I went to her and I said, "Mom, do you remember this?" "Oh yeah," she remembered that. I said, would you forgive me for disobeying you?" And she said, honey, I forgave you a long time ago out there." I said, "But I want to ask your forgiveness. I don't think I ever did that." She said, "I forgive you." I asked God to forgive me. He's completely forgiven me for that disobedience. But he did not take away the scar. He did not take away the consequences of being disobedient to my mom, or being disobedient to him for not obeying my mom. If I could open up my chest here, you'd see scars from the issue when we went through with my dad and mom's divorce that makes that look like nothing. I will always carry results and consequences from that, what happened there. But God has given me the ability to forgive. I challenge you, if you have someone in your life, a parent, a brother, a sister, a former husband, wife, a child, a co-worker, someone that has cut you to the quick more than once, What allows it to heal, and you see the scar, but you can go on with life, is forgiveness. If not, it's like having it festered in there or in your heart, and you say everything's okay. But as soon as you see that person, all that stuff comes right back. If that's happening in your life, I challenge you to say, God, I can't forgive this guy. It's not in my strength. In fact, I'm still carrying a vendetta because what has happened. I challenge you. Allow God to begin to heal you. Help come to the point of understanding to realize that He has forgiven us of so great of sin that if He can forgive us, He can help us forgive those who have hurt us. And you can come up to a 73-year-old man we've all made mistakes. You know, children don't let parents make mistakes. And if to tell you you're about 45 years old and you have your own children saying the same things to you, you realize we're all fallible. Christians, non-Christians, we make mistakes. Allow God to heal that heart and come to the point that you can say, I forgive you. May not respect, you may not condone what they did, but I forgive you. But the last thing I want to say, and I close with this. My brother's still not a believer. He's a great guy. If Pepper was here, you'd love him. Now, he's not as good looking as me. No, I'm kidding. He's a great guy. You'd love him. But he's still not a believer. A few years ago, we were talking. And he said, so, I don't need God. I'm happy. Man, I got a new condo. I drive the newest kind of car. I got the latest clothes. Got a live-in girlfriend. You know, I got a great job. I mean, I don't need God. I'm happy. Why do I need your God? So I told him about the story of the woman at the well. And Jesus came to her and she was drawing the water. And in the process of the conversation, he said, this water will not last. You will thirst again. You can drink of this water, and for the next 6 hours, you may not be thirsty, but you will, in 6 hours, you'll be just as thirsty. The water you draw from will not last. But what I give you is like a living water from within. And if you never drink again, you will be satisfied. So I told him that, and I said, Pepper, if you're driving the same car 5 years from now, are you still going to be just as happy? He said, no, you know I trade in every 2 years. If you're wearing the same clothes 5 years from now, are you still going to be just as happy? Well, what kind of thing? I won't even be the same size. Of course not. I said, if you don't do any renovations to your condo in 5 years, are you still going to be just as happy? Well, no. I went right down the line. He says, what are you saying? I said, I can't tell you you're not happy. As matter as happiness goes, you may be happier than I am right now. But I can tell you, everything you're basing your happiness in will not last. You will thirst again. You're going to have a newer car. You're going to have newer clothes. They're all good things. And they can bring you temporary happiness, but you will thirst. But when Jesus comes in your heart, there's nothing wrong having a new car, but if you drive the same car for 10 years, you can still be happy. If you wear the same clothes and my wife tries to throw some of my old ones away, says bell bottoms went out of style a long time ago, Salt. You know, they're back in. That's what I told her. He says, if you have to wear the same clothes, if you lose your job, yeah, it's difficult, but God can give you strength because who you are, your identity, who you are is not based in what you have and what the society says. It's who you are in your heart. That's why you need Jesus. He gives you in your heart what the world cannot give. Yeah, you can have happiness on the outside. I don't deny that, but it won't last. It won't last. Everyone should know what it's like to put their head on the pillow and know what forgiveness of sins is. To know that, God, I'm as right as I know I can be to you, and for those that I'm working with and will at least let me talk to them, I'm as right as I can be. Everyone should know what it's like it is to have purpose and direction in life. Everyone should have the right to hear the name of Jesus. John said that and we work with, I work across Canada. My wife is a Mandarin church planter, Chinese church planter. So the church we work in has about 80 people from China. And our worship service is in Mandarin and everything. By the way, I've made a lot of great mistakes in the language. I could tell you some stories, and it was very embarrassing to my wife. But we work with we had a family over for Christmas, 4 or 5, 2 or 3, or actually 3 families, about 6 people. And we do this each Christmas. We'll invite about 3 or 4 families over. We'll have a meal and we'll tell the story. And as we were doing that, all these guys that came, they have master's degrees. They're very smart people. And yet, as we told the story, here was a 45-year-old woman with a master's degree in engineering. I read the story of the birth of Jesus. And I said, do you guys have any questions? And this woman here, whose IQ is far, far beyond mine. Because you're saying, well, that wouldn't take much. No, the IQ is far, far beyond mine. She raised her hand. She says, I have one question. She said, was the baby in the manger a boy or a girl? And it was like a knife came into my heart. That even as a non-Christian growing up in Texas in a non-Christian family, I knew that the baby in the manger was a boy and his name was Jesus. Now, I didn't know much else, but I knew that. This 45-year-old woman, intelligent, said, is the baby in the manger a boy? Everybody has the right to know that the baby in the manger was Jesus. And it's up to us, whether it's in this area of Maryland or me across Canada or wherever we are. It is our responsibility to tell them about the greatest news that's ever happened. The baby is Jesus. And he died for us. He wants to live in us and give us eternal life and abundant life right now. I've had many Chinese say to me, do you know if there's a heaven? Well, no, I don't know there's heaven. I've not been up there and come back, there's a heaven. I believe that by faith, but the Bible says when he comes in your life, not just eternal life, abundant life right now. I know what he can do in my life right now. I know what he can do in your life right now. We need to share that story. Everyone has the right to know that the baby in the manger was Jesus. Tell the story. Those that God has brought into your life, tell them the story. Now, most of them know about church and Christianity or someone in Christianity, and they've rejected church. Oh, I know about that. I know that. They haven't rejected Jesus. Tell them about Jesus. Tell them, bring them to Jesus. And let them hear what he can do in their life. It'll change their life. Change their life. Thank you for allowing me to share. I want to end this saying a special thank you for how you've loved my friends, the Kokendorfers, and the Pope. Thank you for loving them. They have spoken so highly of you. Thank you. You are a friend to them. You are a friend to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you for loving those who I loved. James, would you come on now? I'm going to ask James to close it. I don't know how you normally close your services, but I would challenge you. If you don't know Jesus, the greatest thing in the world is to know forgiveness of sin and to know direction. And if you do know Jesus and you were like me, and for a period of time you have held resentment, vindictiveness, you didn't want to, but you've held that, and you haven't been able to forgive. You know those people. You see them coming, and your jaws start tightening up, or your stomach start tightening. You know those people. We all have them. I'm still working on this. We all have them. If that's part of your life, I pray, ask God to give strength to forgive, and He'll set you free. You know, they say that when you forgive, you set the prisoner free, and the prisoner really is you. It's not the person you're holding. You're the one you're holding in prison. Let him set you free. He wants to. He wants to.